Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. Bastille Day. I don't even know if I checked the calendar to see whether that was on there or not. I should have taken a look. Ordinarily, we don't include the European Union's various holidays, just our own NAFTA holidays. The globalists are winning, but not by much, I guess. We have to figure out whether that's on our calendar or not. So, what will you be doing to celebrate the day? I don't know. Well, one thing we could do is check and see that the Netroots radio stream is back up and running. I know we were missing things yesterday. It caused a lot of problems and a lot of complaints. It seems like everything's A-okay. I don't know. You tell me whether everything is running or not. I couldn't tell you. I can't listen to the show and do it at the same time. So hopefully it's all up there and up and running and no more problems. So we'll see. Oh, look, I'm being handed a note that has almost nothing to do with this, I am certain. Okay, yes. Oh, very interesting. So they changed it back. Okay. Well, I had news for you. You weren't going to listen to this news anyway, but I thought
sure if you were going to talk about it.
Okay.
I wanted you to say that.
Yes. Okay, but now's not the time. Thank you very much. But yeah, I should have waited to look at the note. The introductory music is playing, and it's just playing, and I'm saying yes, yes. Well, okay. So the fact of the matter is, it is Bastille Day. We have a note here from Bill in Portland, of course, who has nothing whatsoever to do with that. And that's good news, because we like to be distracted from our main task. Okay, well, thumbs up from Brian Monroe, all the way from Canada, telling us that the show is working. I mean, we're airing, we're just not saying anything. That's very important. Okay, well, let's see. Bill was tweeting this morning, Daily Co's Radio is live now, and it's true, we just don't have anything to say. Actually, we're not sure if it's live, he says, because we're not, it's Kagro X still hasn't provided the paperwork. That's me, of course, my responsibility. I don't have it. I didn't do it. I never do my homework. We'll see what happens in the next period of time, or maybe the next 2 periods of time, maybe 3, who knows? You can't tell. Everything's subject to change. But thumbs up from Canada. No word from France, of course. Sometimes they're listening, but it's Bastille Day, and I assume, I don't know, are they closed? Are they having a parade? Are they doing something socially distanced? We don't know. And we may never know. And it doesn't matter very much because we've got other news to cover. Let's see, a couple of items to take care of. First of all, as I said in the Morning Post, I am not here. This is all fake. I'm not on vacation. It's just it turned out I was made out of cake. I don't know. I've been not following that meme. 2 memes I don't know anything about. One, everything is cake, although now I've seen that, and it's not that funny anymore. And what are you going to do? And the other is that apparently, I don't know, somebody dug up, no pun intended, dug up a video from I don't even know when, a couple of years ago, and has been asking me repeatedly, several people asking me repeatedly, whether I remember when technology gave us the ability to hear a mummified Egyptian's voice. And the answer is, I don't think I do. I mean, it rings a bell, but okay. And then they said they made it a truly funny thing by putting a different voice in, except I don't know what voice it is, and 18 people put different other voices in there, and I don't recognize any of them, and they don't say anything funny, and I don't get it. So I guess now I'm old, and I don't understand any of these jokes. I understand the cake ones in that, okay, that didn't look like cake, but now it turned out to be cake. But now what? I don't know what to do with it. It doesn't cure coronavirus. It's not funny. I don't know. Now I'm also inundated in videos about people's having a nightmarish experience where everything is cake, and then they can't believe it, so they reach out to touch the cake, but the hand that they touch it with is cake, and it's enough already. Work on a vaccine. And make a vaccine that's shaped like or a cake that's shaped like a vaccine. I don't know. Even that would be preferable at this point. Okay. The president is, of course, losing his mind whatever the subject may be. It doesn't really matter, honestly. He had another of his wacky... He's been doing press conferences. I don't know where it is, but he's backed up by what appears to once have been a red carpet that is now washed out to an odd pink. And he's looking absolutely ridiculous and saying absolutely ridiculous things. I guess people who were waiting for more confirmation and for him to say outright that, yes, it is true, he believes that testing causes coronavirus, the COVID-19 disease. That it's not the coronavirus that's at fault, it's the testing for it, which causes the disease to spread. He has said it again, and some percentage of the people who spent time last time around saying, I don't know whether he really means that or not because it's impossible to believe someone is so stupid, have now said, oh, it turns out he is as stupid as the person who said windmill noise causes cancer, paints his face orange, F-35s are invisible, et cetera, et cetera. So I imagine even more people will wake up to that at some point today, and then he'll say it again, and people will ask him to say it again. Why they don't... It's interesting watching reporters ask him about that, knowing from the tone of their question that they know that the answer is going to be yes, and then he spits out a yes, and then they let him keep going. I don't know why they don't throw shoes at him like they did with George W. Bush in Iraq, but I guess, he'll probably get arrested. And nobody really wants that. Okay, well, let's see. What else have we put away besides the cake and the mummy things? The note I was handed, which I'm sure you're all, you've been waiting on the edge of your seat to find out what it was. Here in our little corner of the world where Donald Trump comes to spread disease every weekend, I've been more and more concerned about this. I need to talk less about my local school board and more about my local health department. I don't like the idea, this isn't what the note was about. I don't like the idea that Donald Trump travels around the country having rallies in coronavirus hotspots and then spends his weekends in my neighborhood. And I'm concerned about why the health department isn't making him quarantine for 2 weeks in order to play golf here. But I guess, I guess the whole thing is security theater top to bottom anyway. So who knows? Anyway, the note I was handed was about, we did discuss this a little bit yesterday. We had our school board webinar of sorts. I don't know whether they really called it a webinar, but a school board meeting where we were all informed last week of how they would be reopening the schools. Not why they were reopening the schools, because it's not safe to do so, but how they were going to be doing it anyway. And, this is the story around the country. And Trump is insisting that he will withhold federal funds from school systems that don't reopen. Although it's been interesting watching pushback on that. Very knowledgeable people who are, unfortunately, I think, caught up in the curse of earnest Twitter. I mean, they're trying to be straightforward about these things, but reminding those of us who are saying, damn it, it's really upsetting that the president is crazy. It's not entirely within his power to force these things into school. There's not a lot of federal dollars going to school systems, so you can't withhold. I mean, in some places there are, and in some places there aren't. But for the most part, there's not a great deal of direct federal funding for primary and secondary schools. But and that's true, and it would likely cause enormous legal problems. And the idea that the president could unilaterally withhold those funds for the purpose for which he claims to be withholding them would likely be illegal. But there's a lot of problems with that whole scenario, including one, the president is crazy, and that means a number of things. One, he wouldn't, for instance, feel any need to limit himself to withholding federal education funds to retaliate for an education policy that he didn't agree with. He could just as happily order the withholding of federal transportation funds to the state that allows schools to defy his orders, or healthcare funds or whatever. And some of these things, the federal government might even be legally obligated to transfer to the states. But supposing he said, yeah, I understand that there's this legal obligation. Let's see you prove it in court. Not that you can't, it would actually be very simple, but that it will take you 2 years to get it done, and then to win the appeals, etc., even when the case is obvious. Does a state government say, yes, I would like to cost myself even more money by paying for 2+ years of litigation and appeals to get the money that I was entitled to 2 years ago to pay for the medical care or housing or efficient transportation of the people in my state because I defied the idiot president on schools? Or do you say, well, somebody's got to die in order for us to get this money, and it might as well be everyone else's kids? I don't know how. I mean, I know how you're supposed to make that decision. I don't know how politicians will handle that decision making. Anyway, in the meantime, it's apparently fallen to the school boards to put on the dog and pony show about how they can reopen schools safely. In our corner of the world, as in many of their corners, there were multiple plans put forward, and we were given the option for the students in the public schools to choose which option we wanted to exercise. We were offered in a hybrid schedule in which kids could spend 2 days a week in school. I've seen variants of this elsewhere where they rotate by weeks or by 2-week blocks. One block of kids would get 2 weeks in school, 5 days a week, twice, and then rotate out, and the other cohort comes in. Ours goes in, 2 days per week allotments. It was, I thought, originally proposed that kids would go 2 days in a row, then swap with the other cohort. But no, now they've switched it over, or maybe I just misunderstood the first time, to a Monday, Wednesday, and a Tuesday, Thursday cohort. So kids rotate back and forth each day, so the building is nice and dirty and infected every morning when you get there. But I'm sure it's totally sanitized by the, 5 custodial staff that we still pay to run around between the school buildings and squirt it with Windex. And the idea was you'd get 2 days in and then you'd get 2 days out and you'd do distance learning the other 2 days. Except we've all become experts in distance learning now. Experts in understanding how it's not working. And we've learned, in at least where I live, the terminology is there are 2 kinds of distance learning: synchronous and asynchronous. That's fancy terms for there's a teacher on the other end of the computer when you're on it versus there isn't. And so the deal was, if you went to school 2 days a week, the other 2 days, and it's really the other 3 days of the week, but the other 2 days that they were going to do something about the fact that we're supposed to be getting an education. We already, I guess, slashed the amount of time that kids are responsible for trying to educate themselves, I guess, by 20% across the board, just to make room for this thing. If you're in school 2 days a week, then 2 days a week out of school, you would get asynchronous distance learning. What that comes down to, bottom line, is teacher emails you an assignment, you do the assignment, and then email the results back. Teacher, grades it, puts it in the book, but there's no time at which you get on a Zoom call with that teacher and they ask you questions and you answer. It's, here's a what they, when we were in school, here's a ditto sheet. I'm like 500 years old, right? Fill this out, do the math, and then send it back to me. Versus the synchronous version, which is you get on a Zoom class and so does the teacher, and your classmates are there. And as it turns out, it's kind of useless to use Zoom because for privacy reasons, they actually told all the kids last time around to turn their cameras off. So I don't know what they're going to do. Anyway, they all sit there, they check in. I guess the teacher takes attendance, however they're supposed to do that. And they make note of whether you show up or not. And then they teach. And maybe the kids say things during the class, maybe they don't. But they're all supposed to be there at the same time. And it had a schedule to it. You know, you'd wake up and your first class is at, well, they made it late. So like 9:30, and you were going to sit there and have class and then have a 15-minute break and then have another class and another class. And while we had hoped to get some socialization, perhaps, as though that were going to be safe. I don't know. When people said, oh, we're going to make it safe, we said, all right, let's have some socialization, which is safe because somebody said it was safe for our kid, our remaining public school, secondary education student. And we thought that might be okay, even though we hadn't really seen their plan. But then when we did see the plan, we decided that maybe we would rather have the structured option, 4 days a week of synchronous learning, but without the danger of, heading into a super spreader, supercell or 2 mornings out of every 5 weekdays. And besides which, the structure was what was missing last time. And the idea of having him have to be up and out of bed at least 4 days a week to attend school at 9:30 and have a regular schedule throughout the day that occupied about as much time as regular school did sounded pretty attractive, and we opted for that. Once we opted for that, we then found out that our school board must have gotten complaints from the parents of the students who had chosen the hybrid option. They found out that, they were going to school to see teachers face-to-face, synchronously, like actually live sitting there in a classroom with them. That's synchronous too, right? So they were getting 2 days a week of synchronous learning and 2 days a week of asynchronous learning, whereas the 100% distance learning option offered you 4 days of synchronous teacher contact. And they said, that's not fair. One group is getting 2 days of synchronous contact and one group is getting 4 days of synchronous contact. My answer to that was, yeah, and you chose that. But of course, there are some people who would say, well, why can't I have 4 days of synchronous contact, either in school or 2 days in school and 2 days out of school distance learning, but make it synchronous? Right? Well, apparently that's actually very difficult. You would be asking people to do lots and lots of work. So, we can't have that. And I understood that. You can't have the same teachers, knocking their brains out teaching in person and distance. But whatever, various reasons. Anyway, that was interesting was last night as we wrapped up the day and went to bed, that we found out that there had been lots of complaints and that the school board had solved the problem. The solution was, we have incongruity here. The hybrid plan has less less synchronous teacher time than the other plan. The answer to this is we've got to make the distance learning plan worse so that it's just as bad as the hybrid plan. And the new plan was, what we'll do is if you stay home and you have 4 days a week of synchronous learning, we'll slash the class time in half. So that way you only get the same number of hours or minutes in synchronous learning as the people who opted for the only half synchronous plan, which, you could have opted for the synchronous one if you wanted to. So it didn't make a great deal of sense to us, just in terms of we'll equalize things by making one worse as opposed to improving the other one. But that seemed very governmental as a solution. But anyway, as it turns out, they must have had even more complaints overnight and changed it back again. So now the synchronous plan is synchronous all week for the people who said, oh, all week synchronous, I'll take that. I mean, I guess it was synchronous, but it lasted all day for the 4 days. They must have realized at some point, well, we did explain the plans to everyone and they made a choice. And now they're emailing us saying, I made the choice in a terrible, terrible way. And I'm angry because I made the choice based on facts, but then I found out somebody else had made a better choice than me. And I want to I don't want to change my choice. I like the choice I chose. I just want to make sure that their choice is worse and less beneficial. And I don't know, maybe somebody must have woken up and said, wait a minute, that's not a good outcome either. Why should we allow the people who made the poor choices to ruin the choices of the people who made the good choices? Or, whatever. I'm not certain that was the thinking, but so far, it turns out it's changed. That changes nothing for you, but I'd be interested in hearing from some of you whether you're facing similar situations or what kind of solutions your schools came up with. Essentially, though, we still haven't overcome the greatest problem, which is that school boards don't know what to do. There may be no really very good solution, but they're also not going to get any help. Although, interestingly, it turns out, I guess for those of you who would advocate, don't worry about Donald Trump threatening to withhold federal dollars from education because he'll forget by the weekend. That's always a distinct possibility. And I guess there's some evidence for that possibility now out there. Did I put this away? Yeah. Tegan Goddard's Political Wire included a report yesterday. As Trump was, I think, continuing to threaten to cut off federal funding for schools that didn't open to his satisfaction, they floated this summation of a Fox Business News piece that says the headline they use is Trump now wants to give extra aid to schools. So I'm going to cut off federal funds, but don't worry, because at the same time I'm going to increase federal funds. Although it is entirely possible that what he might be saying here is, I will increase federal aid to the schools, but I will then withhold that aid from you unless you do things exactly the way I want. And that might actually even be a cogent approach to the blackmail that he usually uses to do business. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow, we were told Fox Business that President Trump is considering giving additional federal funding to public school districts that fully reopen for the 2020 to 2021 school year during the coronavirus pandemic. Said Kudlow, the president has said that he's willing to consider additional aid in order to help reopen the schools. Just last week, Trump threatened to withhold funding from schools that do not fully reopen. And it may be the case that he threatened that off the cuff, and he had some legal assistants who said that's not actually going to work, and the substitute that they came up with for him might have been, well, here's an idea. Why don't you offer more federal school aid, but then tell people that you only get it if you reopen to my satisfaction? That would actually pass legal muster. And he probably objected, but I don't want to give more federal aid to schools. And he said, don't worry, just raise your standards every 5 minutes and tweet out that nobody is in compliance with it, and then you won't have to give out that federal funding. And, two birds with one stone. I guess he wins on that front. Let's see. Let me check in on a couple of other stories that I put away for you. There are plenty. Let's see. One on the let's talk a little bit more about the coronavirus problems that we have in this country. We learned not that long ago that one of the difficulties we might face in the near future, if there were a vaccine developed to combat COVID-19, we weren't going to be able to get any of it in great numbers, enough to help, let's say, bring about herd immunity in the way it's usually brought about with these kinds of diseases, because getting the vaccine would require having millions, hundreds of millions of little tiny glass bottles to put the vaccine in so that they could send it to your doctor so your doctor could give it to you. And we were out of the glass bottles and not making them fast enough to be able to distribute the vaccine, even if they had developed it the next day, which they didn't. And supposedly we'll have time. Of course, it will take some time to develop the vaccine, and we're almost certainly on a crash program to produce those little bottles, right? No, the answer is probably not. But don't worry, because we'll run into another problem before then anyway. This report from the Los Angeles Times says that other thing that you need for vaccines, syringes, are also in super short supply. And the Trump administration has a bang-up plan to fix that. And it is called looting and awarding the contracts to people who don't know how to make syringes to take care of the problem. Well, are you surprised? That's amazing, right? Syringes are key to coronavirus vaccine delivery. Like really, literally. Trump is relying on 2 untested suppliers. What a fantastic time to experiment. The break's coming up, but I'll give you a flavor of what's going on here. Jennifer Haberkorn is the staff writer for this July 8th LA Times piece. As the Trump administration races to buy hundreds of millions of syringes. Why do they have to buy them? I don't know. Could leave them up to local health departments to buy them. But to buy those for what is likely to be an unprecedented COVID-19 immunization campaign, maybe, if people don't turn anti-vaxxer on us. Success depends heavily on 2 small medical supply companies with little track record of fulfilling government orders of that magnitude. Retractable Technologies Incorporated, based in Little Elm, Texas, announced an $83.8 million government contract in May to provide an undisclosed number of syringes and needles for use with a COVID-19 vaccine. In dollar terms, the single order is double the company's entire 2019 revenue, according to filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So they certainly, even if they know how to make syringes, they've never made anything close to this many before, but they're pretty sure it'll all work out fine because there's millions of workers who totally don't have COVID-19 floating around in Little Elm, Texas to make these things for you, I'm sure. Company officials recently warned of possible COVID-19 related supply disruptions due to the fact that 83% of retractables products are made in China, so don't even worry about it. At least that they've got a healthy workforce. I don't think that's going to be a big problem. The next problem is, do we have anyone to take them off of the boats once they get here? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Okay, let's see. We're keeping an eye on happenings on Twitter, but let's continue with the LA Times thing because the logistics of these sorts of things are endlessly fascinating to me and therefore have to be endlessly fascinating to you. You have no choice. There's a second order out there, a $27.4 million order for syringes and needles with an option to go to $54 million worth. And it went to privately held Marathon Medical Corporation, an Aurora, Colorado-based medical distribution company that has, how many factories do you think? Does anybody want to hazard a guess? I mean, the easy thing to do is to guess 0 rather than try to ponder it. And you'd be right. No factories of its own and acts largely as a middleman. Why don't we cut out the middleman in order to save money, right? That's the usual catchphrase. Why don't we hire only middlemen in order to save money? That would be great. Thank God we finally got a businessman in the White House, right? It's a little odd, but maybe the middleman story doesn't hold any validity anyway. Let's see. Oh, by the way, you should know about the first company, Retractable, whatever the heck it was, Retractable Technologies Incorporated, which makes me think that maybe they got their start in clickable pens, but not really. I don't think that's actually the truth. But anyway, They are a publicly traded company, and they have been, it says, trying for years to become a bigger player in the syringe market. And guess what? The president, who I'm sure, to everyone's surprise, designated that just 2 companies would get all the work in procuring all the syringes that they'll need to vaccinate 300 million Americans, 330 million Americans, and who knows how many shots you're going to need in order to get vaccinated, given what we're learning about antibodies and immunity from COVID-19. But 2 companies alone will provide all of this stuff, and the president knows who they are, and they're relatively obscure. You might have guessed that, maybe some larger medical conglomerates were going to get this work. But if you guessed by investing in those companies that you thought had the capacity to produce this many syringes, you would have been wrong. However, if you had guessed that 2 relatively obscure companies, one of which was publicly traded, was going to, and the one that was publicly traded getting the larger of the 2 pieces of the action here, if you somehow correctly guessed that that company was going to get the gigantic contract twice as big as any it has ever gotten, and representing twice its largest output ever, well, then you could have made a mint, because the retractable technologies apparently saw its stock price more than double after the order became public. I wonder why that's in the article. I can think of no reason. All right. So then there was Marathon Medical Corporation. That's a private company and based in Aurora, Colorado, and they have no factories, but they're going to make all the syringes for you to get your coronavirus vaccine, which hasn't been invented yet. Just wanted to let you know. By the way, though, they were founded by a disabled Vietnam War veteran, Marathon Medical Corp, so that's nice. They do have a long track record of filling substantial purchasing agreements with the Department of Veterans Affairs and other agencies. But before the pandemic, the company, which has 29 employees, that's how you'll get taken care of, 29 employees, they had never been tasked with filling a federal contract larger than $3.1 million, according to a review of federal contract data. But everyone needs a chance, right? Although the scientific race to develop a vaccine gets the most public attention, the massive orders for syringes illustrate how many less glamorous steps the government needs to get right in order to carry out a vaccination campaign. And yeah, you heard me say that right. The Trump administration needs to get it right. Of course, there's every chance that it won't be the Trump administration delivering the vaccine, so there's some cause for hope there. Maybe we'll have an administration that knows what they're doing. They do note here, after the nationwide scramble for ventilators and personal protective equipment earlier this year, healthcare professionals, supply chain experts, and government officials warned that the next critical shortage could be syringes, needles, and other equipment needed to administer a COVID-19 vaccine to about 320 million Americans, the little bottles. Vaccinating that many people could mean the U.S. would need up to 850 million syringes in 2021 to cover an expected COVID-19 vaccine, which could require 2 doses, or more for that matter, we don't know, plus the usual annual demand for syringes and used for flu shots, insulin, and other treatments. Under pre-pandemic capacity, that could take 2 years to produce. So that does sound pretty exciting and doable, doesn't it? 850 million syringes. So imagine what's going to happen. By the way, you want to, if you're still unconvinced that outdoor recreation, like going to the beach, is perhaps safer during the pandemic than any sort of indoor gathering, even if you've packed the beaches. I mean, I think that whole thing was premised on having some distance between people at the beaches, but that's broken down by now. But if you want to keep people off the beaches, just show them pictures of how many used masks, gloves, and now, I guess, of the 850 million used syringes are going to be washing up on our shores, and that should maybe do the trick. Maybe that'll keep people spaced out a little bit more or seeking additional alternatives, recreation outdoors. Democrats on Capitol Hill are pressuring the administration to put together plans for vaccine distribution and to make those plans public. Last month, a bipartisan group of lawmakers, we love bipartisanship, led by Representative Josh Gottheimer, Democrat of New Jersey, demanded, and you know how those go over, they demanded that any future coronavirus bill include money to address the feared shortage of needles and syringes, which is a good idea, but because it was demanded, I guess it won't happen. They go on to express how extremely concerned they are about these things, this time using a quote from Rosa DeLauro, just to give her a name mention there. Let's see. Last week, Republicans on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce released a report that urged the administration to study what could be done. And good luck getting them to study, by the way. Study what could be done in the short term to address manufacturing capacity for syringes and other vaccine-related products that could face a shortage. Why short term? Because that's the amount of time they have left trying to govern, and then they move into permanent minority status and they don't care anymore. The government orders for retractable and marathon signed May 1st are for a combined 320 million syringes and needles by April 30th, 2021. The orders were made under the Defense Production Act, requiring the companies to prioritize the government's needs. Erwin Redlener, a Columbia University professor who has developed programs to help public health departments prepare for disasters, says he's concerned that retractable and marathon could prove to be, quote, grossly inadequate to respond to the challenges ahead. He pointed to what he called very insufficient-looking manufacturing and distribution capacities of the two firms. So a good choice. Let's see. Here's some more, just a little bit. Until last week, some industry experts had noted the absence of the nation's leading syringe manufacturer. Perhaps you might have guessed via investment that they would win some of these contracts. Becton Dickinson and Company, or BD. They noted the absence of BD from the government's campaign. They worried that the administration... here comes Joan, a little earlier than thought. Excellent, we'll take it. Hey, good morning, Joan. How are you?
I am fine. How are you this morning?
I'm okay. I was a little surprised to hear the pleasant tones of the Skype ringy-dingy.
Because you don't check your Skype messages.
No, of course not. Why could I can't do that and also do the show at the same time. It's very tough. Did you ring in and say you were coming early and I missed it? Dang. Okay. Well, that's weird. All right. It was on a Skype message? Oh, that is very odd. How come you would think that would come up a little easier? Okay. Well, let's pretend I had checked it and was prepared for this. And just move on from there. How about that?
I'm very sorry.
Now I'm going to go. That's okay. I mean, you warned me, and I just didn't. No, I think I'm going to blame Skype on this one. I don't see it, but that's okay. I hear you, and that's better than seeing that. So I was just finding out that if we invent a COVID-19 vaccine sometime soon, it won't matter. So that's good news, and it's because the Trump administration mysteriously has decided to turn over all of the responsibility for making the syringes that we would need to deliver the vaccine to companies that don't make syringes. So that's good.
Of course.
Yes, so my guess is that somebody has or recently acquired large blocks of stock in those companies, and hooray, the stock price went up, and then I guess later on, maybe in the Biden administration, they will hire somebody who knows how to make syringes to do this later, but the stock will already have been sold. So that sounds pretty good. Someone will get rich, and then it won't be us, and we might get the vaccine, we might not get the vaccine. We learned in recent days, hey, maybe a vaccine isn't possible because the antibodies that people have to the coronavirus don't appear to last longer than 2 to 3 months, and not everybody has them after you get the disease anyway. And though we might be able to give them to you via injection, who knows how long they'll last. And also very wisely, they asked for, they have geniuses doing the logistics, of course, in purchasing the syringes. They estimate the American population at 320 million people. The population is actually, I think, closer to 330 million, but okay. So how many syringes did they order?
10 million of them are expendable.
Right. Well, they'll be dead by the time we make these syringes anyway, so what's the point? And so then they ordered everybody a syringe. we'll take 320 million. Even though, in all likelihood, the immunization will, if it works, probably take 2 shots, or everyone will need boosters. So we'll need 640 to 660 million syringes just to handle that. But basically, I guess they just said, everybody raise your hand if you're in America. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we need that many syringes, and I'll order them from the company that doesn't make them. So it's a home run all around. Anyway.
We're all going to die, Kagro.
Yes, well,
Sooner rather than later.
Right. Well, it doesn't matter because, as you know, when you ask about coronavirus deaths, we all have pre-existing conditions or are old or getting old, like aging. So, shrug. Nothing I can do for you. You're going to die eventually. The fact that you died of coronavirus at 30 doesn't concern me because who knows? You might have been hit by a bus or might have lived a long and productive life, but we don't care about you. Either of those two things could apply. And so really, what's the difference? Anyway.
You have to really wonder if the people who call themselves pro-life seats and have any niggling doubts at all.
Yeah.
About who they're supporting.
You wonder about those
because
things.
of their pro-life stance.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they just say it when they need it. And that would be no surprise to anybody, I suppose. If they think they can embarrass you by saying they're pro-life and you're not, they will say that. If you think you can embarrass them by saying you're hypocrites, they'll say, I don't hear you, or I need to start a Republican alternative to Twitter, or whatever.
Pretty much.
They can hide any way they like. Okay. What's new on your end? What brings you in earlier today? Now, I would know this if I could find the message, but anything?
It's in Skype. It's not on Twitter.
Yeah, but yeah. Well, Skype is a little weird, and maybe. Well,
in the future, I'll DM you on Twitter for these things. Just another trip to the vet.
Oh, okay.
For the other dog.
Yeah.
We now have a cat that's getting laser treatments and acupuncture for a spinal issue.
Okay.
Another dog that we are monitoring for cancer.
Oh my.
And
okay.
the third pet, the other dog who has suddenly developed some incontinence issues that are pressing.
Yeah, that you want to get that taken care of. And, okay, the medical issues continue for the animals, and sounds very fancy. It's good. I know it's pet healthcare. I mean, what are you going to do, right? You can't not do it, but it just gets expensive and troublesome, of course, like taking care of anyone else. But I don't know. No insurance, or very very rare that they offer. I've seen it.
Well, there is pet insurance, but usually when you think about it, it's when your pet's sick, and other insurance used to be.
Right.
Pre-existing conditions are excluded.
Right, and no one will bring that up because it ends up. Yeah, they make you sound ridiculous, like you're doing something unimportant, when in fact, it's quite important to. Pretty much everyone in America knows exactly what that would feel like. It's interesting that that doesn't get addressed.
Speaking of which, since we're thinking about this kind of thing, the Supreme Court has not put the Affordable Care Act case in its October hearing session.
Oh, okay.
So they're going to be hearing it after the election, which I thought was sort of curious.
Yes. Well, why do anything that could help people decide what to do in the election when you can hide the ball? And I guess the plan is see if we can squeak by and then destroy it, or destroy it and drop it on the laps of the Biden administration. Or
I think that one's more likely.
Okay. I mean, it's a thought, although I think the Biden administration probably in its files somewhere has, like a plan that they could say, well, I'll tell you what if we pass the exact same thing? And I guess they could change it a little bit, but if they did pass the exact same thing, that would be interesting. How long would it take? I guess, what if they just said, we're passing the same thing and we're going to bet that one of you idiots is going to die and we get to replace you before the case reaches you? Or we're going to expand the court and it's going to be a totally different Supreme Court that reviews our new plan, which is the old plan.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they could do better than the old plan by a little anyway.
They could do better than the old plan.
Yes. But it would be, well, we'll see what goes on. And, what a disaster that they would hand the repair of a healthcare access plan to the successor administration to the one that designed it, and said it was a BFD when they passed it too. Don't want to have that guy in charge of. Okay. Well, anyway, yeah, that's interesting. So, a good political play by.
A good political play, but it's not as though we're all going to forget that the Trump administration is arguing to the Supreme Court that the Affordable Care Act should be completely dismantled in the middle of a pandemic, with now 5.4 million people having lost their health insurance because they've lost their jobs.
Yes. People might recall that, and someone might make a commercial on television that says so.
Or, several thousand commercials on television that say so. This is, it's an unfortunate gift for Democrats. It's good that we have the gift. It's unfortunate that so many people's health care is so much jeopardized.
Yeah. Well, another day at the office, really. Republicans jeopardize health care of millions. Okay.
Republicans just jeopardize the health of millions. They jeopardize the lives of millions.
Yes.
Certainly their financial lives. This, right now, in 11 days, the enhanced unemployment benefits that people have been getting are going to start to go away.
Yeah. Because so will the virus.
Because so will the virus. Who knew? Who knew? And the Senate's not back in for another 5 days. So that gives them a week to figure out how they're going to continue unemployment benefits for people. Yeah. Republicans don't want to continue to give people any kind of financial security and have these bonus payments because they say that makes them not want to go back to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would think that, the threat of going out into public and dying because you catch a disease would be more of a disincentive to return to work. But
it's the one that's...
They, I don't know if it's projection, If they won the lottery, would any of them...
Oh. Yeah, I don't know.
Do they think that because, you finally can pay your bills, you don't feel like you have to go out and earn your living?
I don't know. That's what they've been saying since the beginning. Although they even said it before the pandemic, they always thought that, unemployment benefits just make people want to, not go and work. Although, if the concern is the economy, if you just gave everybody money, things would kind of hum along. It's just that
things would hum along because people still have to buy things.
Yeah, but I guess the idea is, but I wouldn't be able to become wealthy from other people's labor. I would just get the regular amount of money that everybody else is getting, and they wouldn't need to bow and scrape to me and toe my line in order to be able to eat. And that's what's bothering me.
I think that's what it is. You would think that they would at least understand the point of view of, say, a landlord.
Yeah.
Who,
Trump is
needs to collect rent in order to pay her bills.
Yeah.
And can't collect that rent if people don't
have it and
have money to pay.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do I know? What do I know? I'm not an economist. I'm just a blogger.
You did a pretty good job of it. I think I did. It was you had tweeted just the other day, yesterday, I think, like, it almost like it would have been easier to just give everybody money.
It
and
would be
say,
much easier just to give
Go.
everybody money. Just give everybody money.
Yes. I mean,
Oh, well, yeah, I did a story yesterday on the
Yeah.
PPP program, which
yes.
Daily Kos did get a PPP loan, and it is helping us tremendously meet payroll
Yeah.
and extending us for who knows how long. So, yeah, it has had its uses, but it's also just been a mess for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And has not done the job it needs to do for millions. Lots of small businesses haven't been able to get the money. Lots of small businesses look at it and say, I can't take on another loan. I can't risk
if you can't.
having not being able to bring people back to work and thus not having this loan forgiven, meaning it's more debt for me. I can't do this. And there are even banks that are saying this is dumb. This is a problem for us. It's hard to. We don't know the rules. You didn't tell us the rules when we started out. It's a lot of paperwork. We're not in charge of doing this kind of paperwork. It's a pain in the neck. Why? Despite the fact that they've made billions off of it, a lot of bankers are arguing just give the businesses the money. Just give them grants. Cut out the middlemen. Just do this.
Oh,
and we also had a Bloomberg report yesterday that the SBA has got all sorts of crazy problems with their data.
Is that right?
Yes.
Well, maybe we should send the National Guard.
They're not keeping track of who's got what loans. They're saying people who have loans of like $1,300 actually got $1 million.
Oh. Well, I can't pay that
some
back.
people whose jobs have been retained get $4 a month if you average out the amount of loan that the company got, how many employees it has. It's just their data is very confused and very messed up.
That's weird.
So there's no question that this program has outlived its usefulness, as anything designed by Marco Rubio and Susan Collins would.
Well, the program might outlive Susan Collins, so
that's very true.
Bad. I could take that, but that's very. I mean, that's kind of odd. Like numbers, write them down. What's the problem? You know, anything could happen in large scale operation, but what a strange thing. I guess data is a huge problem for this government, which I guess can't count or add or whatever it is that they're unable to do. I did see news that I guess somehow, under what circumstances, I don't know, Trump proposing to send the National Guard to help, quote unquote, help hospitals, track their own data about coronavirus. I've never thought of the National Guard as emergency number crunchers before, but I guess maybe they could help the SBA too. If the data is the problem.
Yeah, this one I just don't get.
I mean,
Well, I mean, I do get it. They're looking to send the National Guard out to do whatever they can get the National Guard to do, and if that's standing over a hospital administrator's shoulder saying, as Mark Sumner said in his post, "Are you really sure he died of COVID? Are you really?"
Right. Fix bayonets and tear gas anybody who says that somebody died of coronavirus. I figured that they were going to count the number of occupied beds. They would just fire tear gas into the COVID ward and then count people who come crawling out. And so there you go. You had 20. Well done. Now they've, of course, come out and coughed all over everybody from the tear gas, but you have 20. We'll be back tomorrow to count again when you have 300. But yeah, I don't. There's no role for the National Guard in that.
There's no role for the National Guard. Unless all of the National Guard have medical degrees and they can go in and be helpful.
I guess.
But it's federal troops everywhere, including Portland, Oregon, where they're critically injuring people by shooting at their heads. I don't know if you saw this story yesterday over the weekend.
Yeah.
A peaceful protester was shot by a federal officer in the head with a non-lethal munition,
Yes.
critically injured.
Mm-hmm.
But what's scary about this is the fact that the Trump administration has sent in a federal army to Portland, ostensibly to protect the federal buildings there. There aren't monuments there to protect, Confederate monuments, but the federal courthouse and federal buildings there, they figure they've got to protect. The Portland police did not ask for this assistance. Certainly the city council didn't ask for this assistance, nor the mayor, nor the governor. But they're sending in these shockwave troops to conduct war against peaceful protesters.
I mean,
in a democratic city.
I guess it's just narrative setting for Trump. He seems very interested in making sure people believe that democratic cities with democratic mayors are in chaos, and that federal buildings, I guess, are under threat from. I don't think anybody has ever made any such comment about threat. It doesn't net anybody anything to even vandalize a federal building. It doesn't do much for anybody, but I suppose for Trump's people, it's a believable threat. Yes, the protesters are out to destroy a Department of Agriculture field office. It's extremely important.
Gosh, or occupy a national wildlife refuge, maybe.
Oh, yeah, right. True. Now, we've seen that happen before, and to no avail. But not much response about that either. Yeah, I don't know. I found that very odd, but I guess it makes him look, it gives him the image he wants.
It's law and order, and he can say, these people were totally out of control. These animals were out of control in this democratic city, and I went in and I took over.
Yes. So, okay, I imagine that's what he's got in mind. All right, well, we are up against our first break here. We'll be back.
We are, and I'm afraid it's going to be my exit. I'm sorry.
Well, you have things to do, including using up the last syringes in America for your pets.
For my pets.
It's as good a use as any, and they're welcome to it. So that's fine. All right, thanks for joining us. I'm glad you were able to do it. And even just a brief visit with you, even when it's a total surprise, is a great treat for us. Thanks. We'll catch up with you next week.
I'll try to pop in later in the week and spend a little more time.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and it's back to just me. Glad to have Joan here for just even a few minutes. It's always nice to break things up and get us back on track when we're wandering down the various wormholes that we can lose ourselves in. I think we get the point, certainly, to return to the theme of the before times, that it looks like the LA Times piece on how the Trump administration sort of kind of wants you to think that they're going to be able to procure the supplies they need to deliver a vaccine to you is going to work. And I guess all that remains is to find out who had the stock in the publicly traded or even the privately traded, who might have some ownership interest in the privately traded companies that really, maybe they'll come through and it's a fantastic thing and will grow in one case, a veteran-owned business into a global powerhouse, and as a middleman. And so it'll be the strongest middleman in the whole wide world. And we'll all get lots of vaccine, but it won't matter if we don't make those little bottles or never invent the vaccine or find out that there's no immunity to be had. One of the articles I should have added to yesterday's lineup speaks to that. I'll give you at least a taste of what's going on in this one from The Guardian. Immunity to COVID-19 could be lost in months, a UK study suggests. That's why The Guardian's covering it. Let's see. We'll have to... we'll definitely cut things short because we don't have access to their paywalled piece here. But it's an exclusive, although other people are picking up on the report, certainly. King's College in London found steep drops in patients' antibody levels 3 months after infection. So it just, so far, naturally doesn't last very long. I don't know what they can do in the creation of a vaccine, that will give you the sort of, artificial granting of immunity. I don't know whether that will last any longer, or, is it something you're going to have to get boosters for every 3 months, or is it, something you do once a year seasonally, or are they able to boost the effectiveness and the longevity of the immunity granted by antibodies if they do it in the lab? No one knows, but a worrisome prospect. And I guess that just goes along with the story we read yesterday about people finding themselves supposedly reinfected after, about 3 months in the case of the doctor and patient we read about yesterday. All right, I guess an update on the Roger Stone situation. Today is the 14th, and it was the day he was supposed to report to federal prison, but I guess he's not doing it. But the interesting news yesterday was that Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who was in charge of Stone's case, actually did the right thing in demanding that the paperwork be produced. Show me, don't just show me the press release that says that the president granted clemency to Stone. Show me the documentation. Make the president do his homework. They did come up with something, I think. I saw circulating on Twitter photos of the second page, the last page, which bore the signature, allegedly the signature of Donald Trump, who purports to be president of the United States, was in fact on the part of the page I saw. Somebody had tweeted around a couple of his pardon and clemency grants to compare this one to, and it looked to be more or less regular in form, although they did point out in most cases these documents, when prepared by the pardon attorneys at the White House, they are prepared with a signature block, which has a space for the date of the effective date and for the signature block, and that these other examples were somewhat different. That is a minor issue, but pardon me, but that the pardon attorneys, in preparing the thing, will stick the thing in a typewriter and type in the date, and it's very formal and rigid, like this, they date it by saying this blank, this 10th day of November. And I think they actually go with the archaic, in the year of our Lord, which really they could get rid of at this point. Year of our Lord, 2020, and then they say, and because it's a government document, and of the independence of the United States, the 220, whatever, whatever the number is at this juncture. I've lost track of these things. But they type in the number and then hand it to them and say, use your Sharpie and sign this thing and it'll be effective. But for the Roger Stone one, they hadn't filled in the dates, which, again, it's not important. It's not that it makes it any less effective if Trump writes in the dates with his Sharpie, which is what he did here. Although it is funny that it now reads this. It was purportedly done on the 10th of July. And, where it says this blank day of blank. And he wrote in July 2020 and then wrote 10 for the day, whereas, somebody who knew what they were doing would write 10th. So this 10 day of July, but okay, it probably will work just as well. What was more interesting is the fact that it was left blank, which indicates that a pardon attorney wasn't, present and preparing this thing in real time for the president, and might indicate that the president asked for it to be drafted up some time ago, but leave the date blank because I don't know when I'm going to sign the thing. I just want it in my briefcase that I'm going to make somebody else carry around in case I quick have to pardon or grant clemency to Roger Stone. It's a plan to do that. We just don't know when. That was kind of interesting. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean I accept the documentation. I didn't see the president sign it. You would think he loves showing people when he signs things that he's done that. And we didn't see any video of that. And so I don't know that it wasn't signed by someone else. There's no reason to believe that Trump wouldn't sign it. I just don't know that it's been signed. And if you're going to be a stickler for procedure, why not be a stickler for procedure in a way that makes Roger Stone have to report for prison? But no one's going to do it. And but I just thought I would update you on the fact that had happened. I should probably get a note to myself to look for the tweet with the pictures of the other clemency grants so you can take a look at it too. So, all right, there we are. Note to self. And I'll forget about that now going forward. All right. Speaking of that issue, though, let's dive into the the mechanics and legalities of it. I happen to have for sharing with you the justsecurity.org entry from Sam Berger. It rhymes with hamburger, but that's not what I said. Sam Berger. Sam Berger you can find on Twitter. Hamburger too, but Sam Berger you find at samberger_DC. And I'm sure in his profile there, he'll tell you what we learn here at Just Security. He's the senior advisor at the Center for American Progress. It just says the senior advisor. I believe they probably have more than one. But from 2015 to 17, Berger served as a senior policy advisor at the White House Domestic Policy Council. 5 years also at the OMB in various roles, including senior counsel and policy advisor. And for those of you who either value such things very highly or may be a member of the same alumni association, Swarthmore College graduate at JD at Yale Law School. So for all of you fancy pantses, you can rejoice in that and maybe get together with him at a Swarthmore alumni mixer. Wouldn't that be exciting? More exciting, though, is what he's written perhaps about, he's definitely written it. It's perhaps more exciting about Roger Stone and the pardon. It's interesting and titillating, but I don't think we're going anywhere with it. But you never know. In the next administration, maybe we would look backwards to try and correct some things rather than let it all be water under the bridge. And maybe this could serve as a stepping stone through that water that's going under the bridge, to mix our metaphors. Roger Stone, who was part of the Trump campaign's efforts to collude with the Russian government and then help to cover it up, it's helpfully explained here, is set to report to prison on July 14th. Stone was convicted of lying to he's no longer set to do that, but Stone was convicted of lying to Congress during its investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. As the judge noted in his case, Stone, quote, was prosecuted for covering up for Trump. That is true. Stone refused to testify against Trump, and now Trump has all but said, and now has actually done it, this was written on July 10th, all but said that he will pardon Stone, stating that Stone, quote, can sleep well at night, unquote, in response to a complaint that he would serve a lengthy prison sentence. In addition to being a brazen abuse of power, the pardon could put both Trump and Stone at risk of further criminal liability for conspiracy to obstruct justice. And in doing so, Trump could create legal liability that is impossible to wipe away through a subsequent pardon. That does sound rather exciting, doesn't it? Now, remember, again, this was a grant of clemency, not a pardon, but I don't think it makes a difference in this context. But we'll press on here. As I noted, that is Sam Berger noted, in a previous piece for Just Security, pardons only apply to past acts. Otherwise, and I assume here that the clemency grants work the same way in terms of what they apply to. I think it had to be the case for a clemency grant, because in order to grant clemency, you have to, dismiss the need for serving a prison sentence, or in this case also supervised release and probation afterwards. Plus, Trump's grant also actually waived his fine that I think he was fined $20,000 on top of it all, and that's waived too. So just in case you were wondering that why he wasn't also being given a financial windfall, the answer is he was. But anyway, as Sam Berger tells us, pardons and clemency grants apply only to past acts. There has to be a past act in order for you to have been sentenced for it, right? Otherwise, if the president could pardon future behavior, he or she could give anyone a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card that would let them commit federal crimes without consequence. I laugh, but they are almost certainly trying to think of a way to do that right now. Case law reflects a recognition of this important limitation on the pardon power, even when courts grant that the power has tremendous breadth. In Ex parte Garland, the Supreme Court noted that the pardon power was virtually unlimited and extends to every offense known to the law. However, the court also noted that it applies to an offense after its commission. Similarly, in United States v. Wilson, the court noted that a pardon exempts the individual from the punishment the law inflicts for a crime he has committed. This limitation takes on particular significance when a pardon is part of a broader conspiracy, for example, to obstruct justice, just to pick a conspiracy out of a hat, let's say. A ridiculous-looking penguin-looking top hat, for instance, you could pick this out of, like the one that Roger Stone has and wore to the inauguration. Conspiracies, here's why. Conspiracies are ongoing crimes. As the court has noted, once a defendant has joined a conspiracy, he or she continues to violate the law through every moment of the conspiracy's existence. So, if a conspiracy exists to obstruct an investigation, and part of that obstruction involves pardoning someone who hid evidence or lied to investigators, then the pardon itself is a continuation of the conspiracy. That means when the pardon is issued, there is an ongoing crime that both the president and the recipient of the pardon are committing at that time. Since pardons can only apply to already completed crimes, a pardon that furthers a conspiracy to obstruct justice would be invalid with respect to that conspiracy, as would any subsequent pardons that further the same conspiracy. Both the individual issuing the pardon and the one receiving it would remain fully liable for the conspiracy to obstruct justice. It's a fun theory, but I don't think anyone will be putting it forward, certainly not today in front of Judge Jackson, that in such a way that it would result in a temporary, can you do it? You can't do a temporary restraining order against the president's grant of clemency. So I don't know. Maybe you invent something. Why not? You know what? Go ahead and do it and let them litigate that for a couple of years, and we'll just see whether they scoop them up and put them in prison or not. That's all that really matters. And the answer is no. And we get an emergency stay of her order, I think, in short order, and everything would be back to terrible normal. So there's more, though, which he puts under the heading of the need to investigate a Stone pardon. And why not investigate it? After all, Congress is now investigating the Mueller investigation. So why shouldn't we investigate the Stone pardon? Should Trump pardon Stone? There are a number of reasons to be concerned that it is part of a larger conspiracy to obstruct justice and thus invalid with respect to the conspiracy. I'm trying to think as I'm reading this whether he would claim the same of a grant of clemency versus a pardon. If a grant of clemency doesn't wipe out the guilty verdict, it simply says the time in prison doesn't have to be served. And then we have noted the difference between a grant of clemency and a pardon, in that the pardon requires, or is said to require, an acknowledgement of the guilt. And so therefore they went with a grant of clemency, not saying this, yes, I did do this Russian collusion, and yes, I did do this lying to Congress, but simply saying, if I did, I don't have to go to jail for it. I guess the question is, do you need to complete the crime in order for the grant of clemency to be valid? And I guess the claim still is, in order to have been sentenced for a crime, the crime has to be complete, clearly, under our legal system. Although, well, no, I mean, I guess it could still be ongoing, I suppose. There could be other actors in the conspiracy. You presumably are taken out of active participation in the conspiracy by being sentenced to prison. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not so certain. I wonder if there's any sort of update from him. We could check by looking for Sam's Twitter feed to see whether he's made any further comment on this. So far, let's see, right up at the top, he's more preoccupied with coronavirus, as we all were. Here is a July 13th piece, so that's subsequent to this, although it's Sam Berger retweeting Kyle Griffin sharing this very article. So anyway, I guess he's happy enough to have Kyle Griffin claim that the article is still relevant, and he doesn't dismiss it. So let's see. I guess he still thinks it's valid. He's retweeting Greg Sargent, retweeting the thing as well. So I guess that's supposed to stand in for his agreement that it's still a valid argument. So let's continue. Should Trump pardon Stone or grant him clemency? We'll say there are a number of reasons to be concerned that it's part of a larger conspiracy to obstruct justice and thus invalid with respect to this conspiracy. First, there is the nature of the offenses that Stone committed. He lied to Congress repeatedly to obstruct the investigation into the Trump campaign's contacts with Russia. But his lies were not only numerous, they were obvious. He claimed to have no written communications about WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, yet he had many such communications. He claimed to have no written communications with his intermediary to WikiLeaks, yet there were hundreds of such records. He said he never discussed his conversations with the intermediary with anyone in the Trump campaign, yet he did so on a number of occasions. To tell such blatant lies and expose oneself to prosecution raises a question as to whether he was doing so with the belief that he would not be punished for these actions. Of course he did. And if so, why he thought that was the case. Second, recently revealed sections of the Mueller report show that the special counsel's obstruction investigation specifically included Trump's behavior towards Stone. The report shows that there was good reason for Trump to be concerned about Stone's testimony. In written answers to the special counsel, Trump claimed, quote, "I do not recall discussing WikiLeaks with Stone, nor do I recall being aware of Mr. Stone having discussed WikiLeaks with individuals associated with my campaign." It's a very long sentence. It was written for him. Yet, there were several witnesses who had said Trump was told of Stone's access to WikiLeaks, probably by Stone, and at least one said he had witnessed a call between Trump and Stone on this very topic. Shortly after submitting the written answers, Trump criticized witnesses who testify about the illegal conduct of others in general, saying, "This flipping stuff is terrible," and noting that Stone did not flip on him, and that was, quote, "very brave." Trump went on to publicly praise Stone's guts for not testifying against him. At the same time, Stone's public comments made clear he was aware of Trump's written answers, and thus the legal risk they posed to Trump. The Mueller report concludes that Trump's actions support the inference that the president intended to communicate a message that witnesses could be rewarded for refusing to provide testimony adverse to the president and disparaged if they chose to cooperate. Third, Stone has already received preferential treatment from the Trump administration. After his conviction, the Department of Justice took the unprecedented step of overruling career prosecutors to request a more lenient sentence for Stone. In response, all 4 career prosecutors resigned from the case rather than sign the new sentencing memo. One of the prosecutors who worked on the case said, What I heard repeatedly was that Roger Stone was being treated differently from any other defendant because of his relationship with the president. I was told that the acting U.S. Attorney for D.C., Timothy Shea, was receiving heavy pressure from the highest levels of the DOJ to cut Stone a break, and that the U.S. Attorney's sentencing instructions to us were based on political considerations. I was also told that the acting U.S. Attorney was giving Stone such unprecedentedly favorable treatment because he was, quote, afraid of the president. It's very interesting that they had to put I guess just for fun, put these people through such a loyalty test, given that they knew that they were going to commute the sentence no matter what it was anyway. So I suppose maybe there was some thought that, oh, well, if the judge just sees the writing on the wall and sentences him to probation, then we won't bother with clemency because nothing will have happened to him. He will just go out and, well, presumably violate his probation, and we'll pardon him from that later on. In response to the department's egregious politicization of Stone's sentencing, a bipartisan group of more than 2,600 former DOJ lawyers has noted that Attorney General Bill Barr was doing the president's personal bidding and called on him to resign. He didn't do it. Stone did something to justify the administration taking such extreme steps to protect him. The question is what? Finally, this is not the only instance of Trump reportedly using his pardon power to encourage people to lie for him. The Mueller report details how Trump advisor and lawyer Michael Cohen said that he had discussed the pardon with Trump's personal lawyer and understood, based on this conversation and previous conversations about pardons with the president's personal counsel, that as long as he stayed on message, he would be taken care of by the president, either through a pardon or through the investigation being shut down. After Trump's national security advisor Michael Flynn pleaded guilty and began cooperating with Mueller's team, Trump said he had no worries about what Flynn would tell investigators, and shortly thereafter publicly discussed the possibility of pardoning him. Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort told his deputy, Rick Gates, not to plead guilty to any charges because Manafort was talking with Trump's lawyer and will be taken care of. The Mueller report notes that the evidence supports the inference that the president intended Manafort to believe that he could receive a pardon, which would make cooperation with the government as a means of obtaining a lesser sentence unnecessary. Like Stone, all three of these men lied to investigators to hide information that would have been very damaging to Trump. Maybe, if anything can damage Trump. Cohen lied to Congress about the business deal that Trump was pursuing with Russia during the campaign. Flynn lied to investigators about serving as the middleman again, between Trump's transition team and the Russian ambassador to discuss sanctions for Russian interference in the election and ensure the incoming Trump administration could have better conversations with Russia about where we were going regarding our relationship. Manafort lied to federal investigators about his contacts during the campaign with an associate who had ties to Russian intelligence, including sharing private polling data with him. Nor are these the only reported instances of Trump offering a pardon to encourage lawbreaking. Worried about his political prospects if he didn't complete construction of his border wall, Trump reportedly offered to pardon administration officials if they broke the law to build the wall quicker. Then he forgot about it and didn't do anything. Trump also reportedly told the head of Customs and Border Protection that he would pardon him if border agents illegally blocked asylum seekers from entering the U.S. Given the blatant nature of Stone's obstruction and the significant evidence that Trump sought to influence Stone's behavior with the promise of rewards for not testifying against him, any Stone pardon would demand investigation. Well, this one does. That Stone received special treatment from DOJ after not testifying against Trump, and that Trump has a pattern of offering pardons to people who induce them to break the law, are further reasons to examine the matter closely. But the current DOJ, clearly, which Barr has warped into a political tool of Trump, would not undertake a fair investigation. However, this does not mean that there's nothing to be done. Oh, good. Let's find out what. Congress. Oh, well. Congress has an important role to play in the aftermath of a Stone pardon. It should immediately launch an investigation, subpoenaing witnesses and documents, to what end, I don't know, relevant to the pardon. Even given the likely stonewalling by the administration, these actions would help to preserve evidence, maybe, and signal to career staff that Congress takes this abuse of power seriously. That could lead conscientious whistleblowers to come forward, as has happened repeatedly when Congress presses an investigation into Trump's abuses of power. It could also dissuade career officials from taking or cooperating with obstructive acts directed by the White House or DOJ leadership, making it that much harder for those acts to be successful. Could be. In addition, Trump should Trump lose the election, and Trump should lose the election, right? There would still be plenty of time to investigate and prosecute any crime. In this case, the next administration should ensure that career prosecutors can investigate without fear or favor whether the pardon is part of a broader conspiracy to obstruct justice. It would be interesting to find that out, don't you think? The remedy for the current politicization of the DOJ is to let law enforcement follow the facts wherever they lead, including with respect to potentially criminal behavior of a prior administration. There's little question that presidential exercises of the pardon power can themselves be criminal. Trump's own attorney general acknowledged in his confirmation hearing that it, quote, would be a crime to pardon a witness in exchange for their refusal to testify. Not that that's going to get you anywhere, because Barr doesn't care, and didn't when he said it. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the show here on Netroots Radio. It's the Kagro in the Morning Show, in case you were wondering. I decided to just shorten things, but then make it longer by going back and filling in the blanks. All right. We're just at the end of Sam Berger's Hamburgers article here. We just had a little bit left. Yes, as we exited, we said there was this issue of Bill Barr during his confirmation hearing being asked point blank by senators who obviously knew that it was coming, that if the president were to pardon a witness in exchange for their refusal to testify, would that be a crime? He says, yes, it would be a crime. The follow-up question, of course, should have been, would you prosecute that crime in earnest? And I don't know whether he would have, I assume he would have said, yes, sure. And then everybody would have said, well, we have no choice but to confirm you. And not that there was anything that they could have done to stop it. He was then confirmed on a partisan party line vote, although I wonder whether there were some crossovers. I don't know. There were, of course, Democratic-leaning lawyers out there saying, oh, Bill Barr is a straight shooter. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody should confirm him. And then he turned into this. And oh, well. Anyway, the conclusion of the article here. Moreover, there is precedent for investigating the pardons of a prior president. For example, the DOJ investigated pardons by President Bill Clinton to determine if they constituted bribery, obstruction of justice, or other illegal acts. I think we all remember that being the case. Maybe not. I remember it. Anyway, it's important to remember that while the pardon power is broad, it is not unlimited. If Trump has entered into a conspiracy to obstruct justice, then the pardon power cannot save him or his co-conspirators from accountability, unless it does. Whoops. Oh, well. Anyway, of course, my theory has always been, let's misinterpret the Constitution in order to invalidate his pardons by claiming that the phrase, or the operative phrase in the Constitution, which I think everybody believes was meant to preclude the president from pardoning the crimes that might prevent the president from dismissing an impeachment case in Congress with a pardon. might actually be read quite incorrectly, but what the hell, let's make him litigate it, to mean that a president who has been impeached cannot issue pardons. It's not the case, but let's make them prove it's the case, even though it will feel stupid to make them do it. But if it takes 2 years and Roger Stone has to spend 2 years in prison waiting for them to resolve that case, well, it's no skin off my nose. Or at least I don't think so. So let's go forward with it. In the meantime, let's see, I happened to just see something go by on Twitter, which will help you fill in the blanks to know what sort of ineffectual complaints among powerful Democrats will this situation engender. And the answer, as always, is found by checking in with Senator Pat Leahy. He says this: as a former prosecutor, I know if there is reasonable factual indication of a crime, an investigation is warranted. The commutation of Stone has the indications of a crime by Attorney General Barr's own sworn testimony. I am calling on the Justice Department to live up to its name and investigate. So I'm sure that they will, because they'll be like, oh, the name. We have to investigate. And then he publishes his letter to Attorney General Barr. And, do you want to know what nothing will happen on the basis of that letter? Well, you can really only do that by dissecting the contents of the letter itself. And it's probably it's not super lengthy. It's only a page and a half. But I bet it boils down to pretty much what we just read from Sam Berger, and then ends with, so, you should probably do something about that. Like maybe, I don't know, investigate. And I assume that will be answered by, thank you for your letter. We should investigate. And then, maybe they don't investigate. And Patrick Leahy says, that's infuriating. And then we all move on. Okay, just so that you know what was going to happen. It's out there, and we'll take note of it and file that next to. I'm totally going to do something about blue slips. And we'll switch gears for just a moment. I happen to see this nice encapsulation of the way messaging is running from out of the White House these days. I happened to notice this earlier that I guess Trump and, I don't know why, but Ivanka were photographed for some event during which they were, I guess, announcing the White House's new proposition, new program for people who had lost their jobs during the coronavirus pandemic and the subsequent economic collapse. And if I understand rightly, the plan was summarized best by saying those people should find something else, find a different job. That's really it. And everybody was walking around astonished that, that was bad because it doesn't really mean anything. Of course you should find another job. The question is how, or, could I have some assistance in doing so? And I guess the answer is no. But I happen to see here Brad Bauman tweeting here. So real Donald Trump, using his Twitter handle, his message to you is, I effed everything up, but you should keep on living your life as though I didn't. I'm sure there are folks that this will resonate with, but implicit in the message is cultivating the belief that you are on your own out there. He's retweeting Alan Smith's tweet about the month of messaging. Alan Smith, a reporter for NBC News. He's got pictures of two NBC News headlines of late. First, find something new. White House-backed ad campaigns advice to jobless. That's their new thing. And apparently it comes with an accompanying 30-second advertisement that I don't know where they'll be running it, probably on television. And there's also a hashtag of find something new out there. I guess this comes from, here's Ivanka Trump's tweet about it from 3 hours ago. More than ever, our hashtag Pledge to America's Workers is focusing on helping Americans, United States flag emoji, bolster skills to find new jobs and navigate career transitions. Today we are launching the hashtag Find Something New ad campaign. And it is accompanied by an AP News article that's entitled, White House Campaign Urges Jobless to, quote, find something new. Here's the straight up AP News report on it, accompanied by a picture of Trump holding up a signed paper. Once again, he loves showing the signed papers, but he didn't show us this Clemency signature. Accompanied by Ivanka, 6 feet away from him, pressing her hands together, I think presumably in the midst of clapping and saying, yay, Dad. A new White House-backed ad campaign aims to encourage people who are unemployed or unhappy in their jobs or careers to, quote, find something new. They need to be encouraged with an ad to do that. The opening ad in the Find Something New campaign beginning Tuesday, that's today, features ordinary people sharing their stories. A companion website provides links to training and other resources. The initiative was swiftly criticized on social media, with some suggesting the effort is insensitive during a pandemic and the widespread unemployment it has caused. Others criticized the involvement of Ivanka Trump, President Donald Trump's daughter and White House advisor. The Trump administration has long emphasized, I guess to normalize things here, emphasized skill-based job and vocational training as an alternative to 2 or 4 year college degree programs, arguing that college isn't for everyone and that many jobs don't require a degree. But in the long in the works effort has taken on a new sense of urgency after the coronavirus outbreak cost millions of people their jobs, many of which may be lost forever. The campaign is a product of the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board, which Trump created in 2018. The board is co-chaired by Ivanka Trump and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. There has never been a more critical time for Americans of all ages and backgrounds to be aware of the multiple pathways to career success and gain the vocational training and skills needed to fill jobs in a changing economy, said Ivanka Trump, who graduated from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, if you believe that. The nonprofit Ad Council on Tuesday was announcing Find Something New, which it created in collaboration with IBM, Apple, and members of the Business Roundtable, along with the White House and the Workforce Policy Advisory Board. The initial 30-second spot features ordinary people talking about their experiences, including a guy who says, I got laid off twice, but you got to keep going. I'm now a consultant in the tech space. So there you go. Brand new, fantastic advice to people who have lost their jobs. Find another one. Pretty good. So anyway, that's alongside in Alan Smith's tweet. He's got the 2 NBC News headlines. Find something new, the White House says to people who've lost their jobs. And that juxtaposed with, we need to live with it. The White House readies a new message for the nation on coronavirus. You lost your job? Get another one. You got coronavirus? You live with it. That's that's great messaging. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And does it really matter? Just live with it. Have what there is to have. And if you don't have a job, go get one. That's a hell of an issue. All right. Well done. They've really come up with a winner on that one. Let's see. What other things might we be wise to share with you in the last couple minutes of today's show? I want to scroll a little bit further back and see what else we can grab here that we might have missed for the past couple of days. Lots of people talking about the Arizona teacher who died from COVID-19 during the summer school session. That's a little bit troubling for those of us wrestling, as you found out we are at the top of the show, wrestling with the reopening of schools. Still not a lot of information from which to glean what practices might and might not work in this situation. I've seen dozens of articles on this teacher who died, and the one I put aside is now missing from, it's on Fox too. It's not like they're trying to deny that it happened, but lots of various articles discussing the fact that they had I think we mentioned it the other day, the 3 teachers sharing a classroom for whatever reason. I would like to know what the reason is. Why didn't they just put them all in different classrooms? But my guess was that they were trying to see, there are safety protocols that we intend to implement to keep people safe when we reopen schools in the fall with students. Do they work? And the answer for these 3 teachers who all contracted coronavirus is no. And the one teacher who died, definitely not. And but what they aren't telling us a great deal about is what were the practices so that we might try to improve upon them. But I guess that's not something they're willing to share for whatever reason. Let's see. Other things that we likely ought to share. Let me scroll a little bit further back and see. Every day I go back further in Twitter and say, damn, I didn't share that thing and I really meant to do that. I meant to share the news of the Supreme Court ruling on faithless electors. We, I think, saw that happen during one of our previous shows while we were on the air. That came down and we never really went back and discussed that one. Mark Sherman writes for the AP, Justices rule states can bind presidential electors' votes, which is really interesting. And I guess the big question is, what are the implications in other parts of electoral college law? The focus of this particular litigation, this case, was about whether or not states can force members of the Electoral College to vote for the person for whom they were supposed to vote in the Electoral College, even if they have some sort of weird new objection. And the answer is yes, you can be forced to do that. And it has some interesting implications. The AP's write-up of it here, in a decision flavored with references to Hamilton and Veep. Interesting. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously that Monday, this was back on July 6th that this piece was written, that states can require presidential electors to back their state's popular vote winner in the Electoral College. The ruling in cases in Washington State and Colorado, just under 4 months before the 2020 election, leaves in place laws in 32 states and the District of Columbia that bind electors to vote for the popular vote winner in those states, as electors almost always do anyway. So-called faithless electors have not been critical to the outcome of a presidential election, but that could change in a race decided by just a few electoral votes. Of course, it takes 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. A state may instruct electors that they have no ground for reversing the vote of millions of its citizens, Justice Elena Kagan wrote in her majority opinion that walked through American political and constitutional history with an occasional nod to pop culture. Such an order by a state accords with the Constitution as well as with the trust of a nation that here we the people rule, Kagan wrote. President Donald Trump has been both a critic and fan of the Electoral College. No surprise he does both. In 2012, he tweeted, "The Electoral College is a disaster for a democracy." But in November of 2016, after he won the presidency despite losing the popular vote to Hillary Clinton, he tweeted, "The Electoral College is actually genius in that it brings all states, including the smaller ones, into play." Monday's ruling was not about the legitimacy of the Electoral College or an ongoing effort to effectively eliminate it by having states commit to support the national popular vote winner. That's the big question. What does this mean for that? That proposal, sure to be challenged in the courts, wouldn't take effect unless states constituting a majority of electoral votes endorsed it. The court acted on another issue, whether electors are free agents regardless of what voters in their states decide. The justices scheduled arguments for last spring so that they could resolve the issue before this year's presidential election rather than amid a potential political crisis after the country votes. Kagan recounted how the Constitution's original rules for presidential electors sowed confusion because there was no distinction between votes for president and vice president. She noted that the results of the 1796 election gave President John Adams and his political rival Thomas Jefferson as vice president, a situation Kagan called fodder for a new season of Veep. Things got worse 4 years later when Jefferson and Aaron Burr finished in an Electoral College tie, sending the election to the House of Representatives. It took 36 ballots and the influence of Alexander Hamilton to elect Jefferson as president, Kagan wrote. Isn't that interesting, by the way? The wisdom of the founders, et cetera, et cetera. 36 ballots to decide as between Thomas Jefferson, now as a result of that 36th ballot, regarded as, widely regarded as a hero of the founding, even though he, of course, comes under deserved criticism for his views on slavery and, of course, rape of his slaves. But, sure. Leaving that aside, though, I mean, like I said, widely regarded as a titan of the founding. Anyway, you can still say that, right? Even though the founding was flawed, you can bake that right into it. Whereas Aaron Burr, widely regarded, widely remembered for his trial for treason and his murder of Alexander Hamilton, which may even have been justified. I don't know. I'll look back on this thing. I haven't seen Hamilton yet. That probably argues the opposite, but, other arguments have been made or could be made. But he's not regarded, of course, as being in the same league as Thomas Jefferson. How had the 36th ballot gone the other way? Very interesting to consider whether or not Jefferson would have been the one left behind in all of this. But we were that close to favoring Aaron Burr over Thomas Jefferson. Okay. Well, anyway, Alexander Hamilton, of course, secured his place on the Broadway stage. No, he didn't. But possibly in the cemetery, too, by lobbying Federalists in the House to tip the election to Jefferson, whom he loathed but viewed as less of an existential threat to the Republic, she said. How interesting to be talking about that now. Those two elections led to the adoption of the 12th Amendment, which produced the Electoral College rules used today, with a separate ballot for president and vice president. By then, everyone had had enough of the Electoral College's original voting rules, Kagan wrote. The closest electoral margin in recent years was 2,000, where Republican George W. Bush supposedly received 271 votes to 266 for Democrat Al Gore. One elector from Washington, D.C., left her ballot blank. When the court heard arguments by telephone in May because of the coronavirus outbreak, justices invoked fears of bribery and chaos if electors could cast their ballots regardless of the popular vote outcome in their states. The issue arose in lawsuits filed by 3 Hillary Clinton electors in Washington state and 1 in Colorado who refused to vote for her despite her popular vote win in both states in 2016. In so doing, they hoped to persuade enough electors in states won by Trump to choose someone else and deny him the presidency. It's a very long walk to get around to doing that. Because I was faithless, you should be faithless too. It made some sense at the time, I suppose, a last-ditch effort. Anyway, I guess the big question coming out of all this is if states can, by law, bind their electors to vote a certain way, is the limitation of this that they be bound to vote for the popular vote winner of their state, or can a state bind its electors to vote for the national popular vote winner regardless of the outcome of the popular vote in their state? It would appear, I think, to strengthen the argument for the National Electoral Vote Compact, or whatever it is, the National Popular Vote Compact, I think what they call it. But I suppose, there's room for arguing, no, it only applies to laws that bind electors to the outcome of the popular vote in the state. The national vote would be of no concern to the state legislatures in this case. I could kind of see it going either way. So that's still up in the air. Just thought we would update you on that one in case you thought that had been settled or that there was room for more activity there. I think we'll find ourselves in court over it regardless. I'm fairly certain. Okay. Let's see. So many other interesting items to choose from. Let's throw this one in here because this one's been waiting around for a little while, and I saw Kamala Harris tweeting about this article, a Huffington Post piece in which it's argued, and she reminds us, that Trump is responsible for the desecration of several national monuments, even as he brags about signing executive orders to bring things crashing down on the heads of people who desecrate national monuments, even those that really can't be desecrated because, well, one, they shouldn't be national monuments. They're monuments to the traitors of the Confederacy. And two, there's no way to really desecrate that. But this is, I think, a good reminder from Huffington Post that Senator Harris sent around. Trump has dismantled more monuments than any protest. The president is threatening 10-year prison sentences for anyone who vandalizes a monument. He has destroyed 4 himself, including one honoring Native American cultural heritage. Chris D'Angelo reminds us for the Huff Post. Amid a national uprising for racial justice in a deadly pandemic that's disproportionately impacting black, we'll use Gil's term, Latine and Native communities, President Donald Trump is promising lengthy prison sentences for anyone who destroys or dismantles a monument to a slave-owning president or a leader of the Confederacy. I don't know if he limited it that way or not, but that's the interpretation. At a Saturday campaign rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, remember that one? Trump came to the defense of Confederate leaders like Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Stonewall Jackson, whose statues have been defaced and removed in recent weeks. The unhinged left-wing mob is trying to vandalize our history, desecrate our monuments, our beautiful, beautiful monuments, he said, adding that they want to demolish our heritage. And after protesters attempted to topple a statue of slave-owning Trump hero President Andrew Jackson near the White House on Monday, Trump announced on Twitter that he had, quote, authorized the federal government to arrest anyone who vandalizes or destroys any monument, statue, or other such federal property in the U.S. with up to 10 years in prison, effective immediately, he added, but may also be used retroactively for destruction or vandalism already caused. But is it Trump, or rather it is Trump, who has done the most damage to national monuments, dismantling or desecrating 4 federally protected land and water sites with significant cultural, archaeological, and natural resources. I'm sure the Trump fans say, that doesn't count. That's a national park, not a national monument. It's designated a national monument. It's different. It's just not a dumb-looking hunk of metal for no reason. Anyway, these rollbacks include, in case you've forgotten, carving more than 2 million acres from a pair of protected national monuments in Utah, Bear's Ears and Grand Staircase, or Escalante, right? In December of 2017, the boundary of Bear's Ears, a 1.35 million acre landscape that several tribes consider sacred, was cut by 85%. That's pretty desecration. No, that's a lot of desecration. It's pretty desecrate-y, to invent a new word for this. Nearby 1.87 million acre Grand Staircase Escalante, the largest land national monument in the country and rich in both archaeological and paleontological resources, was cut roughly in half. This month, Trump signed a proclamation to greenlight commercial fishing within Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument, a vast protected site off the East Coast, a move that goes against the very purpose of designating a marine sanctuary. The administration has also bulldozed and blown up indigenous cultural and burial sites within Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument, a UNESCO biosphere reserve that is also home to endangered species, to make way for Trump's wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Ned Norris Jr., the chairman of the Tohono O'odham, I hope I'm getting it close right, nation, has compared construction of the wall on sacred burial sites to desecrating Arlington National Cemetery. The Interior Department has floated additional cuts at several other protected national monuments. In the case of Bear's Ears, 5 Native American tribes had come together to petition for the creation of the monument to honor and safeguard their cultural heritage. The Obama administration protected the site, named after a pair of buttes, which is home to thousands of Native American archaeological and cultural sites. When Trump traveled to Salt Lake City to sign the proclamation gutting Bear's Ears, he said nothing about the tribe's years-long fight to secure national monument status for the area. Instead, he railed against faraway bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., and boasted that he was ending another egregious abuse of federal power and opening up protected areas to tremendously positive things, namely potential energy and mineral development. The rollback was widely viewed as an illegal assault on tribes, who recently won one of their cases in front of the Supreme Court as well, but not these tribes, and against tribal sovereignty and tribal culture. The Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition, a group of the 5 tribes with ties to the region, called the move a slap in the face to the members of our tribes and an affront to Indian people all across the country. The coalition is among several groups now suing the administration in an effort to restore the monument's original boundaries. So there you have it. There's a bit more here. We can continue on with it, but you get the idea. And of course, Trump supporters, like I said, will dismiss those as, no, I didn't mean like land monuments. Sure, it's got the name monuments on it, but not monuments. I meant like statues. Metal chunks that are formed to look like people. That's a monument, not a bunch of land. I'm sure it just doesn't count to them. But there you have it. I don't know. For whatever good it does you to be able to call out Trump as a lying, idiotic hypocrite, it's of some value. It fills this show, and it may even fill the next show, which, of course, is the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam, who gets another crack at bringing you a live show or at least a brand new show. I don't know what happened afterwards yesterday. Probably was able to put out the podcast, but here's what's on tap for today. Starting off in the Bistro Cafe, Trump botched his attempted erasure of the Mueller report with Roger Stone's commutation. That now back in the news, as you know. On the rest of the menu, a vast majority of Republicans in swing states support the virus aid Moscow Mitch McConnell is blocking. A federal judge permanently blocked Georgia's 2019 heartbeat abortion law, finding that it violates the U.S. Constitution. Remember that thing? And Mars is about to be invaded by planet Earth. Big time. Good. I've been waiting for that for a long time. I'm busy that day. I can't go along.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Internationally, the UN's Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression accused the White House of mounting an onslaught against the media, and the New Zealand opposition leader resigned 2 months out from the election, leaving the Conservative National Party scrambling to find a new leader to face Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Good luck with that one. She defeated the coronavirus.